Board of Trustees for Spiritual Life Center. Today she's going to be talking to us about the field of generosity. Please put your hands together for Tracy Bryan.
So hi everyone. I have not written a book, but I would like to, so I want to talk to Tess about that. I am delighted to be here today and honored, and it's wonderful and also really frightening to see all these faces that I know out in the audience, because usually I'm talking to people I don't know so well on a spiritual level. So thank you, RJG, for having me here today. I'm going to talk about donation, the field of generosity. I believe that donation has everything to do with generosity. As one donor father said, donation brings humankind to its tiptoes. I love that. And I truly believe that's absolutely the fact, because what better gift can we give one another than the gift of life, and give someone else a second chance at life? And interestingly, I find myself at this point in my life getting a second chance. I recently realized the universe was conspiring to say it's time to move out of my comfort zone of my very secure, stable, wonderful job and move into a new space. And I argued with Spirit and Universe for a while, but you know how that goes. So you are possibly my last audience that I'm formally talking about donation to, and doesn't it seem fitting that I'm putting a period on my career talking to people in a spiritual group? I believe that God, she has a very ironic, wicked sense of humor. Sometimes I love that, and other times not so much. So RJ said that he wanted me to share a little bit of my personal story. So I will. I'm a writer, so that book has to be coming, right? I graduated from the University of Oklahoma with a degree in journalism. So if you'd like me to sing the Boomer Sooner fight song, I can do that. I'll spare you. I married my college sweetheart, Dwight, and we were both very into our careers. Me as a television broadcast reporter, and him as an account executive for a writer. We moved to Sacramento in 1989, which now is absolutely my home. I love it here. And I went to work for KCRA. Then at 36 years old, I had the first of what I call my midlife crisis, which I now understand is transformation, right? And I looked around and I thought, is this all there is? I'd gone into television way back, I'm going to show my age here, during Watergate with Woodward and Bernstein, thinking, oh, justice and truth will prevail and I'll help bring that about to the world. And my news director was quoted as saying, we're no longer in the news gathering business, we're in the audience gathering business. And that's when I said, okay, time to switch what I'm doing. So I looked around and I decided, I know, I want a baby. And Dwight and I had both, when we got married, decided we didn't want children, so it took me 2 years to convince him. But I did, and 21 years ago, last month, Jacob came into our lives. Jacob, absolute love of our lives, which if you really read into that statement says something about our marriage, but. So we had Jacob, and I wanted to have a career where I could be home more, and so I, by the grace of God, looked around and found the job at Sierra Donor Services. And I believe the whole reason I was in TV for as long as I was so that I could do this job and help tell the stories that would inspire people to give the gift of life through donation. It's been the career of a lifetime. I just have loved it. So I'm going to give you the quick spiel on organ donation, but I know I've had some donor drives at SLC, and a lot of you are from SLC, and I also know, based on this audience, that probably most everybody has that pink donor dot already, so I'm singing to the choir. But here's my spiel. You can save up to 8 lives by becoming an organ donor. That's because you have 8 vital organs, which is your heart, your 2 lungs, liver, 2 kidneys, pancreas, and intestines. And you can improve another 50 lives through tissue donation, through things like your skin can help burn patients heal, bones can help people avoid amputation, corneas can help blind people see. It's really easy to become an organ and tissue donor. When you go to apply for or renew your driver's license at the DMV, you'll be asked, would you like to be an organ donor? If you check yes, then you're on the registry and you're good to go. If you're not getting your driver's license renewed anytime soon, I can help you sign up today on a website, donatelifecalifornia.org. So there's my spiel. When Jacob turned 8, I realized that Dwight had gone from a heavy drinker to a full-blown alcoholic. Weirdly, he was an amazing dad, very high-functioning alcoholic, but I knew we were in trouble. So did an intervention, and he stayed sober for 1.5 years. But then 4 years after the intervention, we separated and subsequently divorced. And for those of you counting, that was my second midlife crisis. And I did some real spiritual seeking to get to that point of being able to leave him, because he was the love of my life, but I didn't want to watch him kill himself through the bottle. And so I left the church that I had grown up in, Episcopalian. He got the church in the divorce. And I found SLC, Spiritual Life Center. And thank goodness I did, because it has sustained me. In fact, 1.5 years after we separated and divorced, Dwight suddenly and unexpectedly died of liver failure. So fast forward to now. Jacob is 21 years old, last month. He's at San Diego State, doing great. And weirdly, I find that we're on a very similar life path in that we are both looking for a meaningful, purposeful way to give back, to pay it forward in a gainfully employment type of way, and also looking, for love and possibly a life partner. So, I've lost my train of thought. You'd think I'd know my own story, right? So this is why I paused, because this right here, right now, is my 3rd midlife crisis. Clearly, I don't know what I'm doing. I am this time around doing some spiritual seeking and seeking spiritual guidance and going inside and looking at what's next, and I have no idea what that is, so if anybody has any ideas, I am open. So enough about my life and second chances, and let's talk about other life-changing second chances in the field of generosity. So let me tell you a story. Once upon a time, there was a boy, 17 years old, Scott Santana. He lived in a loving home, and he was the kid that bagged your groceries at Rayleigh's. He was funny, he was always there with a smile, tell a joke, and he loved everything vintage, whether it be cars, trucks. He even wore a Letterman sweater, which was not cool because this was 2011. But he didn't care, and that's what drew people to him, because he was true to himself. He was funny, he was generous, he was goofy. But then one day on his way home from school, something happened to Scott. He was driving alone. He wasn't texting, he wasn't talking, he wasn't drinking, he wasn't doing drugs, but he had an accident. He was on his way to pick up his dad, and he was in an inexplicable car accident. His mother, who worked at the school district and listened to the police radio as part of her job, heard it on the police radio and had this inner knowing that it was Scott. So she jumped in her car, rushed to the scene of the accident, but the EMTs and the police would not let her through. But off in the distance, she could see Scott's 240Z that he had just restored, and it was in a crumpled mess. She rushed to the hospital, and for 5 long days and 4 excruciatingly long nights, they prayed for a miracle. And as the Santana family now likes to say, the miracle came, but not in the form they had hoped. Because Scott had signed up on the Donate Life California registry to give life, because that's who he was able to save 5 lives when he passed away. 5 lives. And so that to me is the field of generosity. Deanna now says, on the day that we were receiving the very worst news of our lives, 5 other families were receiving the very best news of their lives. But the story doesn't stop there. Deanna, trying to make sense of this absolutely senseless tragedy, realized that the only good thing that had come out of it was organ and tissue donation. So she decided with her husband, Rich, that they were going to become volunteers with my agency, Sierra Donor Services. So they became Donate Life ambassadors and began sharing Scott's story locally, statewide, nationwide. And then when a job opened up at my agency, Deanna said, this is my job. She applied, and of course I hired her. She's an amazing woman. Talk about a woman who takes life and takes the lesson and evolves and grows into something beautiful. That's Deanna. So Deanna got the job, and she tells her story so powerfully. She connected with a freelance photographer, David Lee, who was doing a project called The Waiting List. The Waiting List is a compilation of a picture and a paragraph, a very strong story, and he picked up on the Santana story and put that on the waiting list. It's a website as well as a Facebook page, and you can look at that. It's just an amazing website. So Scott's story got told, and then a National Geographic photographer saw that, Lynn Johnson, and she decided that she wanted to do a story on it. So this past fall, she came to Sacramento and shot the Santanas with the 5 transplant recipients. And it was so powerful. I was there that day. And the most powerful moment was when Marissa, Scott's 24-year-old sister, he had one sister, Marissa went up and put her ear on the heart transplant recipient's chest, Rod Gramson, and listened to her brother Scott's heart beating 4 years after he had died. Deanna said, and while she was doing that, her parents held her as she wept. And I have a picture of that. It's just, these are her parents holding her as she listens to her brother's heartbeat 4 years after he died. And Deanna later told me, she said, in that one moment, I felt like our family was all together again. I felt Scott there. And that moment was captured on a piece of film. And that National Geographic story will run next month, and it will inspire, hopefully, people to sign up to give the gift of life. And that's how the field of generosity works. But the story doesn't end there. Deanna, when I step down, will be moving into my job. Wow. Was that the right decision for me to leave? So I think that's absolutely perfect. It's come full circle. And that's how I see the field of generosity, is that someone gives, someone receives, And as JG said, there's a ripple effect. And for me, this is an opportunity to step out of my comfort zone and look for a new life's purpose, a new way to give it back and tell stories that will hopefully inspire people and move into a new field of generosity. So I wanted to ask you all if anyone here had a connection to transplantation or donation that has touched you personally, either yourself or a loved one, a family member. Does anybody want to share any of that? Yes, Pat.
Here, let me give you the microphone.
My late partner who passed away. Story. Anyway, I got a call from Sierra, and they said, can they see what they can use? And I said, of course. And I got a call back, and they said, couldn't use any of his organs, but his eyes, his beautiful eyes.
And he was an artist.
And his skin. And that's what I always said, that somebody or maybe two people are seeing through his beautiful artistic eyes. And luckily for them, for somebody or a lot of people, he gained a lot of weight right before, so had a lot of skin.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. Wow. That's wonderful. What a generous soul. And I love it that people who are generous in life can give that gift and that legacy lives on, and that it provides some degree of comfort to those who live on and knowing that that has happened.
How many families have you met that have had to give their children's organs away, or family members?
Wow. Well, I've worked there 18 years, so I have had the extreme honor of meeting so many transplant recipients and donor families, and they truly have inspired me to try and live my highest and best life, because it truly does. Humankind on its tiptoes, that's a great description. And the stories are just beautiful and sad, but there's something good that comes out of it, and I have just been honored to bear witness to that. Yes, Tess?
Tracy, I just wonder if there's any statistics about a young person's heart going into an older person's body, and that older person's perhaps increased longevity.
I actually know personally of a gentleman who was a transplant recipient at Sutter Hospital, Gene Downs. He received his transplant and I think he was 69 years old. It was an 18-year-old young man who was putting up Christmas lights and fell off the roof and became a donor. And Gene is one of those people Gene is the heart transplant recipient, has a heart of gold. He's now 87, and I talk to him each week. He now lives in Washington, D.C. in a veterans place there, very happy and healthy. And some people, worry about that, but he met the family. The family totally brought him they had him to Christmas every year. That he's become part of the family. So it is beautiful that it happens that way. But also, many times, because with organs you have to have, the organs have to be a certain size to fit, and you can't have a huge man and have the set of lungs go into a small woman. So many times, especially with children, the organ will go to another child. In fact, I'll tell you about one of them, Lacey Wood. She was just 10 months old, and a virus attacked her heart, and the only thing that would save her was a heart transplant. And so her parents waited for an entire year, but at 22 months she did receive a heart transplant. And she calls herself Lucky Lacey, and she is an amazing young woman. When she turned 8, she became a Donate Life ambassador, a volunteer for us, and she At the time, we were trying to get the registry up and running in California, so we took her to the state legislature as our ammunition, and boy, she knocked it out of the ballpark. She would show up in her little league outfit, and she's just a picture of health, and darling, and precocious. So that bill passed because of Lacey, so she was able to pass that gift of life on. She went on to go to DePaul University, and I was one of her career mentors for that. She graduated, and now, get this, you're going to love this, she now works doing what I do in LA at One Legacy, and she's paying it forward with her gift of life that she received because of someone else's generous gift.
How old was the donor that gave Lacey the heart?
18 months. It's a little boy, and Lacey and her family write to him all the time, but they've never heard back. And it is a confidential process to protect both the recipient and the donor family. Sometimes the donor family does not really want to know anything further about it, which is absolutely appropriate. So they do write every year, but have never heard back. But that would be a very difficult thing to lose your little boy at that age. But he clearly made a huge difference and continues to have an impact on the world through Lucky Lacey.
I met a man in Louisiana, and I was working at Yellowstone National Park, and he had a heart transplant. And I went back to Louisiana with him and stayed at his house for a couple of weeks in Louisiana, and I got to know a little bit about him. His name was George. And he had received the heart of a 16-year-old girl. So the heart apparently has neurons in it, or our brain has a lot of neurons, but our heart does too. And there's been a lot of research about, and you probably know a lot about this, but that the heart often carries information, a lot of information. Well, after he received his heart transplant, he, within about a year, he started buying Britney Spears and Demi Lovato's. And he had received the heart of a 16-year-old girl, and they started researching this, and so that happens quite a bit. Maybe you've heard. And he was in his late 60s, and he's driving down the road listening to Britney Spears, and so, and I was looking at his collection of CDs. It was really quite.
There's a really good book called A Change of Heart. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's about a woman who was she was a ballerina with a heart disease.
Heart lung?
And might have been heart lung, but she started having very interesting experiences. It was a 18-year-old boy who loved fried chicken, and she suddenly, as a vegetarian, had a craving for fried chicken. Anyway, it's a very good book.
We hear anecdotes like that. I don't know that there is scientific evidence, but we do hear anecdotes like that all the time. And it makes sense.
Thank you,
Cellular
Tracy.
memory.